Sorry, I had a camera malfunction, so this is part four. Um, you'll notice sometimes if you're not very hungry and if you have a small amount of something sweet or a sweetened drink, it'll stimulate your appetite. So another way that cardamom is used in sweets. It's used in masala chai. It's along with ginger. It's one of two spices that you almost have to have in masala chai for it to be masala chai. Masala is spice mixture. Chai is tea. In the Arab world, they will sometimes, and Iran and Somalia, they will sweeten their tea. They'll spice their tea with cardamom, even though they don't use milk. In India, they almost always use milk with their tea. India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. And but another way the cardamom is used is in curries, particularly creamy curries that are made with either yogurt as a creamy agent or what do you call it, coconut milk, and also rice dishes like biryani where there's ghee. And so what I have made is let's see what's the best way to do this. I'm not so expert at switching the camera around without losing the video. So I have made a korma. Actually, before I show you I'll show you the image right now. Let's see if I can do it. Here's hoping. That is a korma that I made. Korma is a Indian, Pakistani, and Afghanistani way of cooking meats and or vegetables. You can certainly make a purely vegan korma with coconut milk and vegetables. I did that for many, many years. Or you could make a lacto-vegetarian one with yogurt. And I'm just going to tell you about this korma that I made because I need to finish up. I learned this dish from Mrs. Mehdi, a woman I knew in Chicago, who was a wonderful cook and in whose house I had dinner many times. And she would make me a vegetarian korma because I was a vegetarian at the time, though she said that it was actually her chicken korma recipe. Vegetables that are good in korma are any kind of root vegetables. Daikon radish is excellent. Carrot is very good. Carrot is classic. Of the green vegetables, normally the only thing that you'll really find is sorry, my nose itches, is green pea. I wouldn't really use leafy green vegetables, but the stalks of green vegetables. So in this korma, I use daikon radish and the stalks of broccoli, and which I chopped up in small pieces, which goes very well with Indian cooking. And here's the recipe. So I sautéed onions, and I used chicken as well. I sautéed onions and chicken together. I sautéed the onions for a while, added the chicken, browned the chicken, and then I added ginger and garlic, and sautéed that for a while. And then the spices that I used were coriander, cumin, fennel, and I used something called Lucknow fennel, which I'll tell you about in a second. It's a very light, soft fennel. I wouldn't even use regular fennel in this dish. It would be either this fennel or no fennel. Bay leaf, Indian bay leaf is better. Cardamon, clove, cassia, which I talked about before, a substitute for cinnamon, and a tiny bit of star anise. And then I cooked the chicken until it was 3/4 cooked. And then I added my additional spices, cooked them for a few minutes to brown them, and then added some water. And then also I had added the vegetables with the chicken, and then I added some water. I'm going to say a cup of water, and this was 2 chicken thighs, 2 chicken legs, and a cup or 2 of vegetables, and 1 red onion. This dish is best with red onion or brown onion. And so then I added a cup of water, turned it down, let it simmer, and then when it was completely cooked, then I added about a cup of yogurt. And the thing about the yogurt is, obviously unsweetened yogurt, you have to whip it with a whisk, whip it really well. If you do, I can't tell you why. If you don't whip it well, it sort of coagulates and isn't very pleasant. So whip it really well, Some yogurts are better for this than others. The yogurt at the Indian market is the texture of the right kind of yogurt. Any yogurt will do. I also will use kefir. So when you use yogurt or kefir, you get a sour flavor. When you use coconut milk, you don't get a sour flavor. But you don't need to add anything for sour flavor if you're using coconut milk, though the Thai people, the Southeast Asians, will add something sour, such as tamarind or lime juice with the coconut milk. Okay, so then when it was all cooked, I added the yogurt and then simmered it for a couple of minutes on low. You don't have to really cook the yogurt. And that's the dish, and this is how it came out. Let me see if I can turn the camera around. No, I don't dare risk that. Here is the dish in the pot. Here's the dish in the pot. I haven't heated it up, so it will look nicer when it's heated up. And here is the dish. I hope this, I can't see if the image is coming out. Here's the dish as it appears on some rice, minus a chicken leg. And you will see that in my dish, there's little pieces of cinnamon. You know, in Indian cooking, Indian culture, you eat with your hands, with your fingers. And then that way you can just pick the cinnamon out. You don't have to eat the cinnamon. A last few words. Since I made this with rice, with basmati rice, I would like you to see, this is the texture. When you cook basmati rice, the grains should be really individualized like that. And I'll do a class on how to get your rice perfect like that, so that each grain is completely cooked, but they're not overcooked, so they're separate. And the last thing I want to do is talk a little bit about some of these, the rest of these spices. Well, not much. Star anise is another sweet spice. A little bit of star anise. Wow, the lighting's terrible now. A little bit of star anise goes a long way. This isn't even the whole star. This is just a chunk. So I would have used like 3 pieces that size. Or if I had a whole star anise, I might have used 1 star anise. Star anise is very potent, very aromatic and fragrant. It's delightful in this kind of creamy curry. They use it a lot in Thai and especially Malaysian cooking in their curries. And also it's an essential ingredient, almost the essential ingredient in Vietnamese pho, the Vietnamese noodle soup, beef noodle soup. The Lucknow fennel that I bragged about, that I mentioned, here's what it looks like. And I'll spell that, Lucknow. Well, it's going to be in the notes. Lucknow. Lucknow is a famous town in northern India. And that's the Lucknow fennel. I don't know if you can see that they're smaller. And it is a just delightfully light, fragrant. It's much more fragrant than regular fennel, the large fennel. And the large fennel has its place in certain dishes, but in curries, the Lucknow fennel is much better. It's more aromatic, it's lighter, it's softer. Another spice that you can use that I didn't is the famous black cumin. Black cumin seed is a kind of cumin with all kinds of health benefits. The people in the Middle East extract the oil from black cumin, and they drink black cumin oil for colds and digestion and the immune system. Now I want to tell you, I'm going to just finish with a fun anecdote about the use of sweet aromatic spices in curries, such as, I wonder if you can see the star anise better now. There we go. In curries. So when I lived in India, I think it was my second visit, and I had learned this recipe from Mrs. Mehdi, but I hadn't practiced it. And so I made this dish, this korma, a vegetable korma, with the spices that I just mentioned. And I gave some to our worker, who lived with us, and we had in India they call them servants. He lived with us, and I had a very warm, close relationship with him. I liked him a lot, and I hope he liked me. and I gave him some of this dish to taste. And he said to me in Tamil, which is the language he spoke, I actually specifically asked him what he thought of my use of the clove, cinnamon, and cardamom. And he tasted it and he laughed. He sort of giggled sweetly and he said, Eitan, Adhigam. Eitan, too much. I used too much. And then he said, Vasan vendum, rusi vendam. You want to smell the aroma of the clove, cinnamon, and cardamom, star anise, those kind of spices. You don't want to taste them. And then he said, so in other words, don't overdo it. It shouldn't overwhelm the dish. It should be like a light fragrance. So he said, and it's very cute how he said it. He said, Vasan vendum, you want the fragrance. Rusi vendam, you don't want the taste. And then he said, Nalla le sapodu. This is a favorite expression that they say. Nalla means good or correct or proper. It literally means good, but it can also be proper. Lesa means light. Light. Nala lesa podu. Podu means to put. So that was a great cooking lesson for me. Put it lightly. So a classic beginner's mistake is to overdo the cardamom. In fact, in the Arab world, they say that in in my Lebanese cookbook, there's a similar anecdote that because cardamon's expensive, poor people drink their tea without cardamom. So when someone suddenly gets rich, like someone who's newly rich, like Donald Trump, who has the money, all the money, but none of the culture or education, they overdo the cardamom. So then they put too much cardamom because they don't know any better. Nobody taught them. And and the same thing holds true, by the way, of the use of turmeric. When you first learn Indian cooking, when you go to India or you see Indian cooking made by Indians, the use of turmeric, it's light. It's not overwhelming. It's not overpowering. It gives a slight bitterness, a slight fragrance to the food, but don't overdo the turmeric. In the beginning, follow recipes or watch an Indian cooking. That's another classic mistake that we Westerners do when we first learn Indian cooking is we overdo the turmeric. And turmeric's very bitter, so it ruins your food. With turmeric, it's the same thing. You want the fragrance, you want the beautiful color, but you don't want to make it too dark. Keep it on the lighter side. That's all I have to say, believe it or not. Thank you for tuning in. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video and feel free to comment and ask questions. So to recap, we use herbs and spices that are pungent, bitter, and astringent. We use the sour flavor as well. We use the salt flavor to help our bodies digest the heavy food that we live off of: grains, flesh foods, nuts and seeds, even fruits. And of course, the bitter vegetables, in addition to starchy vegetables, bitter vegetables. And the bitter flavor in small amounts is medicinal, but in larger amounts is also hard to digest. Poisons are bitter. Medicines that cleanse from the body are bitter. So too much bitter has an excessive cleansing effect on the fire. And you don't want to cleanse the fire, you want to stimulate the fire. So that's how we use these, all of the spices and herbs, and including sweet spices. So when you use your sweet spices, don't overdo it. I would say that in the use of cardamom with desserts, it's harder to overdo cardamom in desserts, because desserts are nice with a fairly large amount of cardamom. But when it comes to cooking, especially clove, a tiny bit goes a long way. Star anise, a tiny bit goes a long way. Cinnamon, you can use a little bit more, but you still don't need much. And cinnamon's an interesting spice too. In that I have a recipe that I made once, which was it's interesting how spices are combined. It's from a Kashmiri cookbook I have, and it was the main flavor combination was cinnamon, garlic, and tomato. And you wouldn't normally think of cinnamon and tomato, but cinnamon and tomato is fabulous in Indian cooking. And cinnamon, it was quite simple. It was probably